Here's the harsh truth. Most blurry photos have nothing to do with your camera. In fact, I'd bet your gear is way better than you think. You're just not using it right. And today I'll show you 9 powerful tricks, some simple, some almost secret, to get tech-sharp images every single time, even if you're hand-holding, even if your subject is moving, even in bad light. And one of them, it involves the way you breathe. Stick around. If your photos keep turning out blurry and you're already eyeing a new camera, hold that thought. Before you spend a single cent, these tips can help you get dramatically sharper images with the gear you already own. Whether you've just upgraded from shooting on your phone or you're still using your camera in full auto mode, this video was made with you in mind. Before we continue, for those new to my channel, my name is Terrence and I've been a wildlife photographer for more than 10 years. I am currently a Nikon creator with Nikon Singapore, and I've also worked with other brands and organizations to create content around wildlife and wildlife photography. However, this tutorial is not just catered to wildlife. All forms of photography can benefit with the following tips I am going to give you. Let's start with something important. If you're still shooting in full auto mode, it's time to break free. I won't dive into how to do that here. There are tons of great tutorials out there on YouTube, but as I always say, manual mode is the way to go if you really want to take control of your exposure and understand what your camera is doing. Alright, let's kick things off with our first tip, shutter speed. The faster your subject moves, the faster your shutter needs to be. Simple as that. A good rule of thumb, keep your shutter speed at least 1 over your focal length. So if you're shooting at 200mm, aim for 1 over 200 seconds or faster. But if you're photographing birds, wildlife or anything fast moving, you'll want to push that up to say 1 over 1000 of a second or even more. Now, here's the catch. The higher your shutter speed, the less light your camera captures. So you'll probably need to raise your ISO to compensate. But when the light gets low, that can mean grainy images. So, what's the fix? Hang tight, I'll show you how to deal with that later in this video. We've all admired those professional looking photos with that dreamy background blur, the out of focus magic that makes a subject pop. So naturally, when we get our first lens with a wide aperture, we get excited and shoot everything wide open at f1.8 or f2.8. But here's what most beginners don't realize. Shooting wide open comes with trade-offs. At f1.8 or 2.8, your depth of field is razor thin. That means even the slightest movement or misfocus can ruin a shot. Maybe the eye is sharp, but the nose and ears completely soft. And here's a lesser known fact. The widest aperture on your lens is usually not the sharpest. Most lenses are optically softer wide open. So if your lens opens to f2.8, stopping down just a little bit to f4, f5.6 or even f8 can make a noticeable difference in sharpness. It's even trickier when you're photographing something up close. The closer your subject is, the shallower your depth of field becomes. So that wide open shot of a lizard or a flower, the focus might fall off faster than you expect. So if you want more of your subject in focus, don't be afraid to stop down. Now of course, closing the aperture means you're letting in less light, which might force you to also raise your ISO. But let's not worry about that just yet. We'll deal with the ISO trade-off in a bit. Let's talk about focus, because even though modern cameras boast insanely advanced autofocus systems, with all the fancy subject tracking and eye detection you see in ads, the reality, it doesn't always work as magically as it shows. Missed focus is one of the most common causes of blurry photos. So if you're finding your shots consistently soft, here are a few things that can seriously help. First, ditch auto OA remote. That's the setting where your camera decides, what to focus on across the entire frame. It sounds smart, but it often gets us wrong. Instead, switch to single point autofocus. This puts you in control, so you can tell the camera exactly where to focus, not leave it up to chance. Next, if you're photographing anything that moves, birds, people running, vehicles, use continuous autofocus, sometimes called AFC or AI servo, and this mode actively tracks your subject as it moves, instead of locking focus just once. Way more reliable for action shots. And here's a bonus tip for those into macro or close-up photography. Every lens has something called a minimum focusing distance. That's the closest your lens can physically focus. Try to shoot closer than that, and your camera just won't focus no matter how hard you try. So if you're doing any kind of close-up work and your images are always soft, it may not be you, it may be your gear. In that case, consider switching to a dedicated macro lens, which is designed specifically for sharpness at close distances. So, alright, let's circle back to what happens when the light starts to fade, low light conditions. One of the best solutions I found, use a support system. A tripod or a monopod can make a huge difference. They allow you to shoot at slower shutter speeds without introducing motion blur, and they help keep your shots steady, even when tracking fast-moving subjects. But I did promise you tips that don't cost you anything. So what if you don't have a tripod or a monopod? No worries, there are plenty of budget-friendly hacks. A beanbag works great, so does a wall, a rod, a fence, or even just resting your camera on your backpack. Anything solid you can brace your camera on, that's already helping to reduce shake. One important thing to keep in mind, if you are using any tripod or stable support, turn off image stabilization. Your camera stabilizer can sometimes cause slight shifts when it doesn't detect movement, which can actually make your photo less sharp. Let the tripod do the job. Now, let's talk about something that's often overlooked: how you hold your camera. It might seem like a small thing, but it can seriously affect how sharp your photos turn out. Here's the basic stance. Tuck your elbows close to your body and make sure your left hand is under the lens, supporting its weight. This gives you a solid balanced grip and helps minimize camera shake. And here's a tip, especially for the smartphone generation. If your camera has a viewfinder, use it. Pressing the viewfinder to your eye creates a third point of contact between you and the camera, adding stability. It's like using your own face as a tripod leg. Sounds funny, but it works. But what if you're shooting from a low angle or using the flip-out screen? No problem. Just use your camera strap. Wrap it around your neck, and when you're shooting, pull the camera slightly forward to create tension. That tension acts like a stabilizer, giving you that same third point of contact and helping you stay steady. Earlier, I mentioned something that might have surprised you. Your breathing can actually affect the sharpness of your photos. Sounds strange, but it's true. When you breathe, your chest moves. That movement travels to your arms, and even a tiny motion can cause micro shake, especially if you're shooting with a telephoto lens or using slower shutter speeds. If you're shooting wide angle and fast, you'll probably get away with it. But the moment you start to zoom in or the light drops, stability becomes critical. So here's what you can do. And yes, this is straight out of the sniper playbook. Breathe out and slowly pause, and then gently press the shutter. That brief stillness in your body helps minimize movements and gives you the best chance at taking a tech sharp shot. Even when you're shooting single subjects, try firing in short bursts of 2 to 3 shots. Your first frame might have some movement, but one of the later ones is usually sharper. You can do that by choosing the burst mode on your camera, either in low burst mode or high burst mode. High burst modes may be better if you're doing any kind of fast-moving action, but of course, it will take up more memory space. This is a great little trick when hand-holding at borderline shutter speeds. Here's something that people often overlook. Even pressing the shutter button can cause enough movement to blur your shot, especially if your camera is on a tripod. To avoid that, use the self-timer. Set it to 3, 5, or even 10 seconds so the camera has time to settle after you press the button. It's a simple way to eliminate that tiny shake from your head. Even better, use a wireless remote or connect your camera to a phone app. Most modern cameras let you trigger the shutter remotely with your smartphone. That way, you can step back, get everything composed, and fire the shot without physically touching the camera at all. And finally, if you've tried everything and your photos still aren't sharp, even when you swear you nailed the focus, it might not be your technique. It could be your autofocus calibration. Some cameras and lens combinations just don't play perfectly together out of the box. Luckily, many cameras allow you to fine-tune your autofocus to correct your front or back focusing lenses. I won't dive into the process here, there are plenty of tutorials out there, but the good news is you can usually fix this right inside your camera, no need to send your gear in. Sometimes it's not you, it's just a little adjustment away from being spot on. Let me know if any of these tips have helped you get sharper images. And of course, if you enjoyed my content, remember to like and subscribe to see more content around wildlife and wildlife photography. You can also support my channel by buying me a cup of coffee, link in the description down below.